Hello everyone, my name is David Nadel from Blue Feather, and today I'm going to be showing you how to quickly set up a web application using your FileMaker database as a data source. We're going to start with an introduction to the tools and technologies that we're going to be using in this video. If you want to, you can skip ahead through this next part and go straight to the installation and setup. Our web application will be developed using a combination of back-end and front-end frameworks to make our lives easier as developers. Frameworks help us do more while writing less code and can help keep our applications more secure by following best practices and implementing common security features out of the box. I'll go through a brief introduction for each of the frameworks we're going to use now, but don't be too intimidated. You won't have to learn too much of these to get started. We won't actually be doing too much with them in this video, but it's important to know what technologies we're using so that you can expand on them in the future. They're all easy enough to learn by reading through their documentation, and the starter app we're going to deploy today will be a great setup for learning more about them. Let's briefly talk about the frameworks now. For our web application backend, we will be using the Laravel framework, which will help us organize our code and provide us with great features we need for a backend application, like routing, controllers, API endpoints, and excellent security. On top of Laravel, we're going to install a package called Laravel Jetstream, which will set us up with a great starting point for our app, handling features like logins, password resets, and two-factor authentication out of the box. To make Laravel and Jetstream work smoothly with FileMaker, we're also going to be installing a PHP package released by Blue Feather called Jetstream FileMaker. This package, combined with Blue Feather's eloquent FileMaker, will make interacting with our FileMaker database a breeze without having to deal with the complexity of the data API and curl requests. For our front-end framework, we'll be using Vue and Tailwind. Vue is a reactive JavaScript framework for building user interfaces, which will allow us to quickly and easily create a rich user experience. With Vue, interface elements are broken into components, which can be reused throughout an application. Tailwind is a CSS framework, which will help us easily style our app. We'll use it in our components to get a sharp, modern, and consistent look and feel. Again, we won't need to do too much with these for what we're doing today, but it's good to know what is powering our app. Before we get into the coding, there are a few prerequisite pieces of software you're going to need to have installed on your system. You will need PHP version 8.0 or later, Composer, and Node version 12 or later. I also recommend using a web development server like MAMP to make running and configuring your web application easier. We'll be using MAMP in this video to run our web app in our local development environment. As an additional recommendation, I encourage you to use an IDE for development like PHP Storm or Visual Studio Code. In the video today, we're just going to be using Sublime Text as our text editor and Terminal for inputting our terminal commands, but we use IDEs for our daily work and strongly recommend getting familiar with one if you plan on doing web application development. Check the description below for links for all of this software. Your FileMaker database you plan to use for storing all of your data will also need to be hosted on FileMaker server with the data API enabled. For the best experience, we recommend using the latest version of FileMaker server. Your FileMaker database will need certain tables and fields to manage things like users and password resets. The example FileMaker database included with this package has the minimum set of required tables and fields which you will need to make sure exist in your file. The example file can be found in the dist folder of the package or downloaded using the links in the description. You should look at this example file and either copy and paste the tables and fields into your solution, or you can create them manually. You'll also need layouts with the fields on them to be used with the data API, which again is demonstrated in the example file. If you just want to get started quickly, you can host the example file itself and use it as your data source, which is what we'll be doing here. I've already uploaded the example file to my FileMaker server, so I'm ready to get started setting up my web app. We're going to start by making a new Laravel app using Composer. We'll use the Composer create project command to download and install Laravel. With that installed, Jetstream is the next thing to install on top of Laravel. We'll cd into our new project folder and then use Composer require to download and install the Jetstream PHP package to our app. Jetstream has some post-install deployment to do, so we're going to do that with the artisan command to install Jetstream using the inertia and view deployment option. Jetstream normally requires a SQL database to connect to. The Jetstream FileMaker package will instead allow us to use our FileMaker database as a data store. Let's install that using Composer. Like with Jetstream, there's some post-install deployment to do for Jetstream FileMaker. Run this deployment using Artisan and the Jetstream FileMaker install command. With everything installed on the PHP side, we need to make a few configuration adjustments to our app. The first change is to tell Laravel to use FileMaker instead of the default Eloquent provider as a source for our users. We'll make this change in the config/auth.php file. The second change is to add our connection to the database config file so that our app knows where to find our database and which credentials to use to connect. Templates for this configuration can be found in the Jetstream FileMaker documentation, so you can just copy and paste this in like I am. With the connection configured, we'll tell the app to actually use it by editing our env file. The values we set in the env are read by the configuration we set up just a second ago. The env should not be committed to version control, so it's a safe place to enter the credentials like your database and password. The default credentials for the Data API user in the demo file uses Jetstream as both the username and password. All of our PHP packages are installed and the configuration is done. The next step is to install and compile our JavaScript using Node. We'll run npm install and then npm run dev, which will take care of this for us. All of our code should be good to go. Let's configure our web host using MAMP. Laravel applications use the public folder as the web root, so be sure to configure that properly in your web host configuration. You shouldn't expose the root of the application on your web server. I'll configure a new host in MAMP and set up a domain for testing, which will be jetstream.test. I'm going to save the new host and start up the server, and I should be able to see the running app in my web browser. Let's go to jetstream.test to find out if our app runs. Looks like it works. Let's open up the FileMaker database and see what happens when I create a user. I'm going to go through the registration process here and create a user account, which we should see reflected in our FileMaker database by a new user record being added. And there it is! A new user record has been created in our FileMaker database. We can see that the password is securely salted and hashed and isn't readable or decryptable. On the web side, I'm logged in as the user I just created. While a brand new app doesn't do much right now, I'm able to use the features of Jetstream to do things like edit my profile, change my password, or enable two-factor authentication. Jetstream is a great starting point for building web apps. It takes care of all the basics for user authentication that we'll need for a new app and lets us focus on building the features we actually care about rather than spending tons of time on boilerplate authentication and routing code. It uses Vue and Tailwind for our front end, so we're all set with the great front-end frameworks to build out our user experience. From here, we're ready to start querying our tables using Laravel's Eloquent models and the Eloquent FileMaker package, which is already installed as part of the Jetstream FileMaker package. Check out the documentation for Laravel and Eloquent FileMaker to find out how to set up your Laravel models to get data from your FileMaker database with simple queries. We at Bluefeather are experts at building and integrating web apps and taking your FileMaker databases to the next level. Give us a call or send us an email if you'd like to talk about your project, and we'll set up a video meeting to review your goals. You can find us at bluefeathergroup.com or via the other contact methods on your screen. Thank you, and I hope you find this to be a great starting point for building out your web app with FileMaker.